Okay, this is Algebra 2, test number 2, study guide for lessons 1, 1, and 1, 2. Again, looks a whole lot like test number 1 because we didn't cover a whole lot more material since number 1. Number 1 says, which number does not equal 27 over 30? Which one doesn't equal 27 over 30? Well, we have to determine that and see what's going on, what percentage we have out of 27 over 30. If you reduce the fraction, it's a whole lot easier to see. The number 30 goes into 3, goes into 27 9 times, and into 30 10 times. So 9 over 10, you know that that's the same thing as D right here, so that equals it, so that's not going to be it. You know that 9 over 10 is the same thing as 90% or 9/10, so that's not going to be it. 90% is the same thing as 0.9C, so that's not going to be it. So by process of elimination, 0.27, big boy B, has to be the thing that's not equal to 27 over 30. Number 2 says, which percent equals 0.69? Again, in order to make a decimal into a percentage, you just move that decimal over once, twice, and it turns into 69%. So 0.69 is the same thing as 69%, A. Then we get into the short answer stuff. It says the sales tax is 9%. What's the amount of tax on $30.95? Well, it's 9%. That means you have to multiply it by, but you can't multiply by 9. You got to multiply by, move that decimal over, you got to multiply by the decimal version, 0.09. So 0.09 times 30.95, so you got 30.95 times 0.09. We're just multiplying one number times all of those. 9 times 5 is 45. 9 times 9 is 81 plus 4 is 85, not 8. 85, so carry your 8. 9 times 0 is 0, plus 8 is 8, and 9 times 3 is 27. So you have 27855. You got to move the decimal over once, twice, 3, 4 times. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So the sales tax is 2.7855. Okay. If you wanted to find that out as far as money goes, you know that money only goes to 2 places after the decimal, so we don't want to go any past 2.78. Look to the number after that. If it's 5 or greater, which it is, that means that 8 goes up, and it becomes $2.79 is the tax. Number 4, we're simplifying 7 over 8 plus 1 over 6. Addition and subtraction of fractions. You have to create a common denominator. 8 and 6 both go into the number 24. You cannot add them or subtract them when they have different bottom numbers. So you have to take 8 and multiply it by 3 to get 24. So convert the fraction by multiplying the top number by the same 3. 3 and 7 is 21. Do the same thing with the other fraction. Multiply 6 by 4 now to get 24. So multiply the top number 1 by 4. So now you have common denominators 24. Add straight across since you have that common denominator 24. 21 plus 4 is 25. There is no number, even though this is improper, there is no number that goes into both 24 and 25. So that's simplified. Number 5 says -2 plus -3. Plus and negative is the same thing as -2 minus 3. Think of your number line. If you start at -2 and you subtract 3, you're going to go 1, 2, 3 more that way, and you're going to get -5. Or you can say they have the same sign, both of them are negative, add the absolute values 3 and 2, and you get 5, and keep the common sign negative. -8 times -4 for number 6. A negative times a negative, anytime it's the same sign, it's going to be positive. 8 times 4 is 48. Number 7 says -25 divided by 5. Now you got opposite signs, one negative, one positive. That's going to give you a negative value. 25 divided by 5 is 5. Any questions through number 7? Number 8 and number 9, we're dividing fractions. So if they look like pluses on your study guides, make sure you understand their division. There's a big word in bold that says divide right over the top of it. In order to divide fractions, you flip it. You change it to multiplication, so 2/3 times, and you flip it and make it say 6 over 3. Once you have that, you do not need a common denominator. The fact that they both say 3 at the bottom is just a coincidence. You can multiply straight across. 2 times 6 is 12. 3 times 3 is 9. And then reduce it. The number 3 goes into 12 4 times and into 9 3 times. There's your reduced version of the fraction. Do the same thing for number 9. Leave the first fraction alone, 1/7. Change division to multiplication. Use the reciprocal, flip it, 21 over 9. and then multiply straight across. Or at this point, you can say, well, I got 21 on the top of one and 7 on the bottom of the other. I can reduce that. 7 goes into itself once, and then the 21 3 times. And we're going to deal with smaller numbers when we do that. If you multiply straight across, you get 3. If you multiply straight across at the bottom, 1 times 9, you get 9. You still have to reduce it one more time. 3 goes into itself once, and into 9 3 times, 1/3. You could have done that a slightly different way than I did, especially without reducing in the middle, but that just makes where you're dealing with smaller numbers instead of larger numbers. 10 says write 336 miles in 11.2 hours as a rate in simplest form. Rate is the same thing as distance over time. Think of looking at your speedometer. Your speedometer says miles per hour or miles over hours, distance over time. So this is your distance measurement right here, 336 miles. And this is your time measurement right here, 11.2 hours. And your rate is going to be equal when you take 336 and divide it by 11.2. Let's see if we get us a nice integer. We sure do. Our rate is going to be 30. And we don't cancel out miles or hours. Miles per hour makes sense to be listed as a speed or a rate, 30 miles per hour. Number 11 says solve T equals V over Q for Q. What that means is you want to isolate Q. So you have T equals V over Q, or another way you can read that as T divided by V over Q. In order to cancel out divide by Q, the inverse operation of divide by Q is multiply by Q. You know that if you multiply one side of an equation, you have to multiply the other side. So what it's going to do right here is it's going to cancel out and leave you with just V on the right is equal to Q times T. Then if you're trying to solve for Q to get it by itself, now it says Q times T. You know to cancel out times by dividing. You want to keep Q over here, so to cancel out T, we're going to divide by it. If you divide the left side again, it'll cancel. You got to do the same to the right, and it'll be listed as Q equals V divided by T. Question was asked earlier, why can't you just divide by V at the beginning? Well, that goes back to the formula itself. It says V over Q or V divided by Q, not Q divided by V. You have to just use your inverse operations and cancel out what you're allowed to cancel out. So that's the only way that you can do it to get Q by itself. Number 12 says evaluate y equals x plus 2 times y equals x plus 2 times x minus 5. Then we're given a value for x. We're going to substitute it in. First thing, y equals 6 plus 2, and that's in parentheses, times 6 minus 5. 6 plus 2 is going to be 8, times 6 minus 5 is going to be 1. So our y value is 8 times 1, or our y value is simply 8. Now we're just naming properties from 13 through 17. Negative 2 times x plus 11 is equal to negative 2x minus 22. You're distributing this to both of them, so that is the distributive property. On the next one, it says 2 times the square root of 8 times 7 equals 2 times the square root of 8 times 7. The only thing that's different about it, all the order is the same. The only thing that's different about it is the parentheses has you do the radical times 7 first, and the parentheses on the second one has you do 2 times the radical on that one. So none of the order changes as far as moving numbers around or commuting them or anything. The only thing that's happening is the association of them is changing. So that's the associative property. And it's of, add this in if you didn't, of multiplication. The reason you don't have to put of multiplication for distributive property, because there is no multiplication for the, there is no distributive property for addition. Number 15 says pi times 6 equals 6 times pi. Notice they just moved from one part to the other part. They just commuted around. So this would be considered the commutative. And its property, again, it's talking about multiplication, so of multiplication. Next one says negative 6 plus 0 is the, negative 6 plus 6 is equal to 0. You're creating 0, or you're canceling out the negative 6 value. So this is the inverse property, and it's of addition. There is no inverse property of subtraction because you do addition and subtraction the same way. And the difference between number 16 and number 17, this is confusing to some people. People think that number 16 is the zero property. It's not. It's or the identity property. People get the identity and the zero property and the inverse property confused a little bit. All you have to do in order to separate them is to say what is the number when it starts and what is it when it finishes. If it becomes zero, that means it cancels out. If it starts as negative 2.5 for number 17 and it stays as negative 2.5, that means its identity did not change. So this is an example of the identity. Identity. That looks very funny. Identity property, and it's of addition again. That's why. It's supposed to have extra T in there, everybody. Identity property of addition. No, it looked funny. Number 18 says evaluate the expression for the given value of the variable. 5a plus 5b when a is negative 6, b is negative 5. 5 times a's value is negative 6 plus 5 times b's value is negative 5. 5 times negative 6 is negative 30. 5 times negative 5 is negative 25. Negative 30 minus 25 is negative 55. Number 19, h's value is negative 2. So in place of both of the h's, you're going to plug in negative 2. 3 times negative 2 minus 6 over 1 plus negative 2, which means the same thing as 1 minus 2. Do the innermost parentheses first. 3 times negative 2 is going to be negative 6 minus 6 is still in parentheses times 4. 1 plus a negative 2 means 1 minus 2, which is negative 1. Negative 6 minus 6 is going to be negative 12. So you have 4 times negative 12 over negative 1. 4 times negative 12 is negative 48 divided by negative 1. Negative divided by negative makes it a positive. Put it way back up here. 48 for that number, for number 19. Positive 48. Negative x squared minus 4x minus 4 when x is negative 3. This is one people make mistakes on because there's a negative already and you're plugging in another negative 3. Or another negative value. Negative 4 times x is negative 4 times negative 3 minus 4. Do the exponent first. Negative 3 squared doesn't mean negative 6. It means negative 3 times negative 3, which is going to be 9. I say that because I'm teaching my Algebra 1 class right now, and that's a mistake that always comes up. So you have negative 9, negative 4 times negative 3. You can do that at this step because it doesn't affect the other part. Negative times a negative is a positive 12 minus 4. Then you just have addition and subtraction to take care of on the last step. Negative 9 plus 12 is 3, and 3 minus 4 is negative 1 to finish it up. And then the very last one you have to do is negative 2x to the third minus x squared plus 5x plus 2, again when x is negative 3. So negative 2 times negative 3 to the third minus a negative 3, that's the part where you might make a mistake, plus 5 times negative 3 plus 2. Do your exponents first. Negative 3 to the third, a negative times a negative is going to be a positive 9 times another negative is going to be a negative 27. So you have negative 2 times negative 27 minus negative 3 squared is going to be a positive 9. I'll just copy the rest down and we'll do it all in one step to where nobody gets confused. Do your multiplication at this step. Negative 2 times negative 27 is going to be a positive 54. Minus 9, 5 times negative 3 is going to be a negative 15 plus 2. Then do your addition and subtraction to finish it up. 54 minus 9 is going to be 45. 45 minus 15 is going to be 30. And 30 plus 2 is going to be 32 to finish it up.